Sonic Universe Issue 57 Reboot. Blaze says that she'll explain why Bean and Bark are here later, even though it'd also take one sentence to just say they were working for the pirates. But she somehow thinks it's faster to just tell her to break the cage. "I'll explain later" is a pretty useless sentence, and she's in a hurry. She also reminds us she's afraid of heights, even though she can hover. Marine says she wants to throw a rock at a bad guy, even though it should be obvious that wouldn't do much to a robot. And also, what rock? And Cream's just confused by what she's saying, when, again, it should be obvious. Oh yeah, and they're being threatened by a giant robot squid, but who cares? It's not gonna injure or kill them. We already saw the concept of a giant squid out of nowhere in Archie Sonic. It's a full robot, and it's being commanded by Captain Metal, so presumably it was built by one of the bad guys here. Then Captain Metal, for some reason, reminds everyone why he needs the Soul Emerald when everyone already knows. So, why doesn't he shoot lasers instead of just sending other robots to chase Bean himself? Also, I guess the stupidly unrealistic name Ego War was written on the machine itself, or else he'd have no reason to know what it's called. More importantly, how on earth did they ever figure out what it did when it was broken when they found it? And they obviously haven't gotten a chance to use it yet. Again, that kind of technology should have been completely out of their scope of knowledge, and they would have no hope of ever fixing it. Unless it was just barely damaged, and therefore really easily fixable. But according to the rewritten history, why was it damaged? And merely damaged instead of outright destroyed by one of the heroes. Captain Metal says that there would be new gold plating for the bot that would bring him the emerald. If he's not lying, and they believe him so he's not in the habit of lying, then he's pretty generous to actually reward his robot slaves for doing what he really wants when they have no choice. I guess they'd only want the gold plating for the look, since gold is pretty soft. Frustratingly, Bean somehow wasn't holding the Soul Emerald he loved tight enough to prevent Johnny from stealing it. He came so out of nowhere that when I went back to this issue to retype my review of it when I lost it, Johnny was a surprise to me all over again. So his role in the story must be really forgettable if I completely forgot he was in it. Not to mention Captain Whisker. But yeah, he came out of nowhere, but it's about time he showed up since he was in Rush Adventure with Marine. But it'd be more creative to not have him show up and repeat his same shtick again. You know, what are the pirates even fighting for? The real-life pirates mostly just stole necessary supplies, like food and toilet paper. Robots don't need those, and so they don't really need money either. The only other treasure they'd steal. So why do they bother stealing from pirate ships? I guess the robot pirates are just after money, for the sake of spending it on luxuries. But we'll never see what those luxuries are, so what is the point? What's their motive? They're probably just robots that were built to get money for their master, who's probably Eggman Nega. And when they outlived him, or somehow got separated from him without Eggman Nega finding them again, enslaving them again. So when they lost their master, they kept up their old habits. I guess part of their money is spent on maintaining and improving on their ship and themselves. So maybe that's why I always found the concept of robot pirates a bit confusing and kept wanting them to be normal pirates. Not only because they don't constantly shoot lasers and other stuff that only robots could do easily, but people become pirates in real life out of desperation as an easy way to keep themselves alive and fed. But robots wouldn't be pushed to that. So they don't even have a sympathetic backstory motive to infer. So they're inferior to real pirates then. They wouldn't be if it was a lot more taken advantage of that they're robots. I hate how stilted Blaze's line, "he'll not escape," is. I complained about overly formal speech for characters with penders too, but at least it makes sense for a princess. I wish Blaze had a tiara to look like an actual princess. The jewel on her forehead isn't enough. This is another continuity. There's no reason to keep the exact same outfits as long as you don't downgrade them. She tells Amy to break the bars when the time is right as she warms up her fists. Wait, if the bars are impervious to her heat destroying them, why does it matter? How can they still weaken and soften up from the heat then? Also, logically the heat would transfer over to Amy's hammer the minute she smacked the bars from convection and burn her horribly. Not to mention the heat would immediately transfer over to the cage as a whole and burn Blaze as well as Amy. Or maybe Blaze has a fireproof aura. She doesn't say that. She doesn't say that she's extending the fireproofness to Amy. This could easily make sense. Marine congratulates Blaze on teaching the robot Kraken a lesson. You'd think the heat would transfer to its entire body and horribly burn all of it, not just the tentacles. But maybe she already defeated it. I can't tell from this panel for sure. If she hadn't defeated it already, logically it would be continuing to attack them in every other panel afterwards. And Cream doesn't already know Captain Whisker, because I guess Amy and Cream aren't good enough friends with Sonic for him to tell them all about Rush Adventure. It shouldn't be a matter of good enough friends. Sonic would be confident enough to want to brag about his accomplishments as a hero to all of his friends. Not to mention, it's just basic conversation. Hey Sonic, how's it going? What did you do today? Or maybe a Rush Adventure ripoff didn't happen in this universe. But how am I supposed to know that? It sure would be some coincidence if, in both the Reboot universe and the Archie Sonic continuity, there was a Rush Adventure ripoff. Captain Metal wants to stop the heroes by blasting them with something, but conveniently, the tiny robots come to stop him after an eternity of just leaving off to the heroes. And he says he'll wipe their kind off the face of the island someday. As I guess being a pirate kept him too busy to have already done it, even by sending robots against them. And the text box calling them aboriginals is confusing since they're robots. Robots can't have ethnicity, just nationality. So they must have been built by someone. Or maybe they built each other. But someone must have made the first one. So they're only aboriginal in design. They can't actually be natives, unless that's just how the magical chaos energy around the world works, and that natural magic happened to magically summon tiny robots to the island for no reason. That sounds a bit more forced than the simpler explanation. Having a Metal Sonic that's a pirate captain really does bring up the question of whether the person born in the Soul Dimension who's Eggman's equivalent there was the one who made him. Who else would make a Metal Sonic? Maybe a similarity to Metal Sonic is just a coincidence, because otherwise I'd really wonder how he thought to build a robot based off a hedgehog who doesn't live in the Soul Dimension and barely visits it. If his similarity is just a coincidence, then that just means he was lazy and uncreative meta-wise with not much of an excuse for it. At least if he was literally meant to be a Metal Sonic, there'd be a point because we get to learn about his own version of Eggman, and inevitably Sonic. But in a world where there's no Sonic, it makes little sense to have a Metal Sonic, unless he was just built after Sonic visited this place. A robot tells him that Bean blew a hole in the wall and ran off while he was being distracted by the tiny robots. I'm torn between knowing that it's good to see the unlikable villain get what he deserves, and being frustrated that the menacing looking villain is being humiliated and getting set back so easily, Ixis style, thanks to a bunch of tiny robots, and Bean and Bark not having explosives anywhere on them to ensure their loyalty. Why'd they expect them to stay loyal to a bunch of robots anyways? What, were they desperate? Captain Metal lashes out at him by cutting his robotic head off, and then tells him to kill Bean and Bark. Again, I know they'll be perfectly fine, so whatever, Metal. You're not even gonna injure them. Somehow, a pair of robots working for him out of fear are stupid enough to tell him that they can't use the submarine just because it's not free of barnacles yet. Who cares? They'd still be able to sail. Why would robots ever care about whether there's barnacles on the ship anyways? Like, isn't that just a superficial complaint? I feel like there's unbelievable stupidity in the characters in every single issue, or at least every other issue, and it's dumb enough it happens once. That just happened to force Metal to blast him with a heat laser for a badass villain moment, but he simply kept it on stun so he could give him orders still, rather than wasting a perfectly good minion. Good thing they're all way too scared of him to band up together and rebel against him for constant mistreatment, right? So if he had this laser power all along, why didn't you use it earlier instead of sending those robots after people to slowly chase them? In fact, if he's supposed to be a Metal Sonic, wouldn't he be insanely fast and just fly or run after anybody he wants and chase them and get to them instantly? So, it's not taking advantage of him being a Metal Sonic. So maybe he literally is only looking like Metal Sonic because the artist was extremely lazy. That's disappointing. A benefit to the pirates being robots is that Captain Metal is able to give gruesome threats to them that would be way too threatening against biological beings in a kid's comic. But I still don't like reading those threats of his because I'm still thinking of the robots as people anyways, because they still talk like them. So while it's getting crap past the radar, it's still just as dark to them. After a robot inexplicably says that Metal's gonna say it, which just draws too much attention to the pop culture reference coming up being a pop culture reference, he tells them to release the Kraken. As of course, Blaze hadn't anticlimactically destroyed it with her first fire attack. You'd think someone with fire powers would be able to create fire hot enough to completely incinerate anything she wants with one hit. But apparently Blaze's powers can only heat things up so much, depending on what material it is. I wish they said that. Blaze hovers after Johnny as he taunts her that she's too slow to keep up with him. Why is Johnny the only one who's fast here and not Metal Sonic? And Blaze, having been told how her friends found her, says that it's nice to know there's still some kind hearts in this world. Again, we aren't told that she was bullied. She doesn't even question how there are good tiny robots out there if this is the first she's ever heard of sprockets. Oh, come on, you don't need to have the word R in the condescending text box that tells you to see last issue. That's so stupid and takes you out of it. It's not like the text is literally coming from a pirate. It's like their only intended audience is children, and that's it, when most Sonic fans are adults. I wonder why the reboot was a financial failure. It does make sense that the reboot would be just for kids if you consider that kids wouldn't have grown up with the actual Archie Sonic, let alone Sad AM. So the reboot wouldn't be like that. But I always hate it when the text boxes that are supposed to just be a meta thing telling you which issue to go back to or something, they try to have jokes in them. It always comes off as obnoxious, like the editor's breaking the fourth wall to goof around instead of taking his job seriously. It's bad enough that happens in the Boom comic. Like when the text box in the first reboot issue was like, see, wait a minute. When Amy asks why there's so many pirates, Blaze says that it's because most of the planet is ocean and therefore lawless and wild. Most of this planet is ocean, and that's not the case here. Did the writer forget that? What she should have said was that a lack of good employment options drives people to become pirates. But even then, the only pirates we see are robots anyways. Apparently they're the exception. In real life, parts of the ocean are owned by the countries near them for a reason. And maritime law is still a thing. So why wouldn't it be the same on her world, where she's the ruler? It would just be maritime law everywhere. That wouldn't be lawless. She wouldn't put up with that. She's the ruler, so she'd get to make the rules, instead of keeping the ocean lawless. That reminds me, if she's the ruler, still being called just a princess because that's just how it is there and she's more appealing that way, she must have a substitute ruler there who's in charge of running things while she's busy looking for the soul emeralds. There's no indication that there's any other royalty than her, like her father. She says she plans on using the emeralds as power to end all of this piracy. All of it? So she plans on being smart enough to kill all of the pirates. Didn't she just imply that most people in the world were pirates because most of the world is lawless ocean? How many people are pirates? It'd be impossible to believe that most people were pirates since there's so many different jobs necessary. I guess the emeralds are too limited in power to brainwash pirates to be good. I don't have any faith in her to actually achieve this since I stopped taking her seriously when she somehow managed to get kidnapped. Meaning that she got established as an incompetent idiot who stops being smart when she loses her cool. It'd be nice if she achieved a happy ending, but this is an action series. So I'm sure she won't, because then the writers wouldn't be able to use the robot pirates in stories after this. So why get our hopes up? They're from the game, so of course they're never gonna bother to get rid of them. Logically, Amy points out that Cream is tiring out already. So that's supposed to be the explanation for why she couldn't have just flown her to the island instead of them needing to rely on dolphins. A flying rabbit girl being able to carry a raccoon girl for a really long time without getting tired would be too unrealistic. So we're just going off the game logic that shows up the most. Amy says to go on without them, and Marine's useful by pointing out that the pirate ship's down below the cliff. Although maybe they could have seen that anyways. And Blaze warns her not to get too close to the cliff, using her fear of heights again. The fact that it shows up multiple times helps it feel like it's actually being used as a genuine character trait of hers to make her a little more sympathetic and deep and relatable, instead of it just being a brief, unfunny gag. It still doesn't quite come up enough though. Too bad they linger on it way too long by Cream asking if she's scared of heights and saying that she sleeps with a nightlight to relate to her. And Amy tries to muffle her laughter as Blaze lies to her. We get it already. So this went from her being relatable to the writer actually thinking it was a funny joke, and that's all it's there for. They could have just not said anything to her about it and pointed out the blatantly obvious for no reason. That's what I had expected because that'd be polite of them. And Cream's again portrayed as an idiot because she asked if she said something wrong, when she should have known Blaze better than that and predicted her reaction. At least it makes her interesting to show her as having no social skills. Like she's only being overly polite to try to compensate for them. The heroes all threatened the pirates, with Marine swinging over to them on a convenient vine. What was the vine hanging from? I loved that the robots actually did take orders from her after seeing Amy and Blaze destroy their shipmates. So now she actually gets to be the badass captain she kept saying she was. When you're watching an action series, you want all the main characters with screen time to be competent, because then they're being cool and enjoyable, instead of an irritating load not contributing to the action. I'd like it if she was in this position all the time. I felt like the koalas were just humoring her because she was a short-tempered spoiled brat they were afraid of, and Blaze told them to just humor her because it's quicker. But these robots actually deserve to be pushed around by her. Johnny hands Captain Whisker some plunder, briefly making me wish Captain Plunder was in this story. I'm sure Lou Stringer or whatever would have given them the rights. And Johnny's taken down a peg after his horribly frustrating special stages because one of the robot pirates says that he did something right for a change. Though I was still confused because realistically, a pirate as fast as Johnny would be the most competent pirate of them all. Not an incompetent joke. If anything, they would be treating him with hero worship. Then it turns out that Whisker can't even keep the emerald because he's under Eggman Nega's thumb out of nowhere. So, he must have made Captain Metal. But the origin story for the robot implies that his real master was lost at sea, and he took over his robot's crew afterwards. Eggman Nega would have had a problem with Captain Metal going rogue and not sending him money anymore. It's a bit more convoluted to have Captain Metal's creator not be an Eggman or even related to one, when he's Metal Sonic. He has black and red eyes and is blue and everything. And I immediately wonder why the robot sidekicks don't get dismantled for snarking at their own master, saying that they've heard that one before, and thus implying that Eggman Nega won't get his comeuppance because Whisker's too pathetic. Also, again, how did they get away with clearly using Eggman Nega as a character if apparently they're not allowed to use him as a character by Sega? This proves that Sega wasn't paying attention to the comic, let alone enough to enforce mandates on it. He chases them into a hole, but I'm sure they'll survive. Johnny spies Blaze and Marine through the telescope he conveniently had with him all along for this exact occasion. Actually, it'd make more sense if he had telescopic lens built right into his eyes, because he's a robot. This isn't taking advantage of him being a robot well enough, so what's the point? They could take advantage of it by him being given tons of slapstick a non-robot couldn't survive. That'd be nice to see, since he tormented us with those special stages so much. At least Marine didn't make it really difficult, if not impossible, to get all the emeralds. And if you didn't like her, you could just skip the cutscenes. But Johnny was unavoidable. After some annoying pirate lingo, Bean shows up on Marine's ship wearing a pirate's captain hat, saying he owns it because he found it. And then he really irritates me with a melodramatic, mood-swinged facial expression and an absolutely gigantic text bubble as he whines poetically about losing his emeralds. We get it! This text bubble could have been a lot shorter, and I hate the way he looks here. We got it the first line. This isn't funny, it's horribly tedious to slog through. He was trying way too hard with this character. Blaze burns his pirate hat with her finger looking cool. As I think about how, even in the other M comic, Bean wasn't outright obnoxious. He wasn't trying to be a bad comedy character. And Blaze tells Amy to keep Bean and Bark in line so she'll be able to easily send them home with her as well, as opposed to just putting them in prison for all their crimes. You'd think them trying to steal a soul emerald would be punishable by death in her dimension, and she as the princess would want to punish them really badly, but they get off scot-free without even much humiliation, because they're organic. And because they're from the games. You know, Rick and Morty didn't run off this kind of meta logic. You didn't have characters getting ridiculous plot armor because video games. You could even see what looked like one of the main characters dying, and then they figured out an explanation to get away with it. Just as the two ships are about to fire at each other, dragging out that happening with multiple panels, the robot Kraken finally comes between them as an evil Chekhov's gun. Thank goodness, because I didn't want to have to sit through more repetitive padding where the two ships fired cannonballs at each other, with the heroes not learning their lesson the first time that their ship would inevitably get destroyed by a laser gun cannon. A pirate ship fight is too risky because the two ships are going to be equally matched. Blaze would be better off immediately just flying over to the pirates directly and melting them all with her fire. Sadly, even more panels are wasted, instead of Marine and Whisker just instantly saying fire, and the squid robot being shot at on both sides. Amy's right, it really is tough since it survived that onslaught. I like that Bean has a bag of gold coins behind him. He should be portrayed as having a decent amount of success at getting money. At least enough that it explains how he can still feed himself without a job. Johnny has to be forced not to run for his life, with Whisker keeping him in danger out of spite, I guess. Somehow, Cream has to actually talk Bean into throwing bombs at the Kraken to preserve his own life. She doesn't simply say that he'll die if he doesn't either. It makes sense if he explained, "I think you've all got a handle on it." Bark really must be only putting up with Bean because he thinks Bean needs someone taking care of him and wants to use his bomb generation power, because he always looks miserable putting up with them. So, do the Soul Emeralds psychically know that they would need Bean's bomb to defeat the Kraken, and that's why they summoned Bean? But Bark was useless. So why did they summon Bark then? It'd be so much simpler if we were just told that Blaze used the Soul Emeralds to summon Amy and Cream to her because the Soul Emeralds told her that she'd need their help. But instead, they're sentient and do it themselves. Blaze agrees to call him the captain to humor him. Bean's bomb is too big, so it kind of crushes him, but fortunately that doesn't completely destroy his competence. I was pretty pissed at the idea that it would, but no, fortunately Bark is able to throw the bomb into the mouth of the robot just fine. So it was just a pointlessly stupid joke. I thought Bean was gonna get inexplicably hurt by his own bomb or something instead of being allowed to save the day. Then Captain Metal grabs the Soul Emerald as it falls towards the ocean, because he used his submarine to get here and caught it after Whisker apparently lost it because the ship shook, and he conveniently let go of a valuable jewel because of it. You'd think robots would have a ridiculously tight grip. Blaze lampshades how stupid she was to offer Metal mercy. Logically, she never would have done that, because he's just a robot. She would have destroyed him immediately. It's always interesting that a so-called hero like Blaze still calls her enemies filth and wants to kill them. But it never leads to anything like her being more competent. Functionally, she's still just as stupidly merciful as her friends. That's why she won't do anything to punish Bean for trying to steal the Soul Emerald. A cop would do that because he broke the law. What kind of princess wouldn't enforce the law? Wouldn't it be nice if we were told that the robots on the pirate ship are fireproof, and that's why Blaze couldn't simply melt them all to death with her fire? Then that would kind of fill in the plot hole about how the whole story arc even happened in the first place. Of course they would have been able to kidnap her if they were immune to her fire, because then what would she be able to do? Well, when you play as her in Sonic Rush and Rush Adventure, she's almost just as fast as Sonic. So, wouldn't that mean she's just as fast as Sonic in the comic too? So, and I remember she's able to jump through enemies and kill them. At least I would have remembered if she couldn't. She'd still be able to attack them really fast and still hit them really hard. But I guess since no other character than Sonic has ever stated to be really fast, it's exactly what it looks like. Do they want to be just like the games or not? Why make a bunch of characters less competent, then? So the story ends with the arc being padded out for another issue unnecessarily. as Captain Metal now has a ridiculous looking bunch of robot crab legs below him, which I completely forgot about. How could he fit through a door? He has a lobster claw for a hand. Imagine how debilitating that would be to his everyday life. Actually, it could have made Ixis a bit more sympathetic if they focused on how his lobster claw hand affects him. Like, see him trying to type and being like, great, I need someone else to do it for me. He wouldn't be able to play a video game. A robot wouldn't put up with that. He'd want to at least have the claw be detachable and have a real robot hand underneath it. Also, if he's supposed to be menacing, it's confused in tone to have him make puns. Let alone a pun that makes fun of himself for having crab legs, when those legs were meant to be menacing. Otherwise, why else would he have given himself them? A Metal Sonic making puns. So this story, by Tracy Yardley, was about the heroes fighting a robot Kraken and Bean blowing it up with one bomb, which caused Whisker to let go of the Soul Emerald and lose it to Captain Metal in the submarine after his ship shook. This was after a Marine awesomely took over one of Metal's pirate ships. The pacing felt really slow getting to that point. Before that, it was just the heroes talking to each other trying to get to the actual excitement, chasing after Johnny. They had to chase him after Blaze weakened the bars in her cage and Amy struck her with a hammer while they were hot. And rather than her and Blaze being horribly burned and put out of commission from convection, they go on with the story with no indication they even lost rings and the rings protected them. It had some good villain moments for Captain Metal because he was showing that he controlled his robots through violence and intimidation, which especially makes sense since he didn't build them, so he's not the original master. So if they aren't programmed to obey him, this is the only way he could get his inexplicably stupid robots to obey him. But it still made me uncomfortable, robots or not, so I don't think I like this. Plus, you think he'd be able to... I guess none of the robots, including Captain Metal, are able to program, let alone reprogram robots to obey him.